All right, so here we are. Behavior 101. I wish that I could say, when this behavior happens, do this. When that behavior happens, do that. But I don't have a bag of tricks. Behavior analysis is not about a bag of tricks because there's so many individual things and it depends on so many different things. So what I'm going to be focusing on today, rather than if this behavior happens, do this, is looking at principles related to responding to problem behavior. So I'm going to jump right in here. If it allows me, there we go. The ABCs, if you've had any behavior training in the past, especially applied behavior training, you've probably seen this before. Antecedent, behavior, consequence. And it's really simple when you understand what that is. Antecedent is simply what happens right before the behavior. Then the behavior is pretty self-explanatory. And then the consequence, it's not punishment like what is thought of in socially. And that's why I don't really like the word consequence. I prefer the word postcedent, because then it aligns very nicely with what comes after, just like antecedent is what happens before. But the problem is that if you put postcedent, it just doesn't come out as a nice, easy to remember ABC. And so most people hear it as ABC, antecedent, behavior, consequence. But keep in mind, consequence can be reward, reinforcement, or it could be correction, depending on the behavior. And then the other thing I say with looking at the antecedent is most often a signal that if you do a certain behavior, then a benefit is available to you for doing that behavior. It could be as simple as here's an addition problem and they solve the addition problem and they get a good job and maybe a star or a good grade or whatever it might be on that. On the flip side, if they have a history of they trying to do that addition problem and failing, so the consequence then being, oh, let's try again, or that wasn't right, then they're more likely to try a different behavior rather than solving the addition problem. And so then we give the addition problem, they might engage in behavior to try and get away from that addition problem, not have to do it. And then if they end up not having to do it, now that has been reinforced instead. And that's kind of where a lot of people have thought about this historically. And then from the antecedent behavior consequence side, that what happened before the behavior and what comes after, we also get the why is the behavior occurring, the function here. And people who are more familiar with, have had some ABA training in the past may look at this and say, wait a minute, there's supposed to be 4 functions of behavior. And yeah, you've probably heard of SEAT rather than this current one I have here, which is SAT. The E that's added in with the 4 is escape. But then it's escape from what? It could be escape from sensory, it could be escape from attention, it could be escape from tangibles. So is it truly its own separate function, or is it really a sub-function of the other 3? And that's what I'm getting at here, is all behaviors occur either to get or to get away from the sensory input, attention from others, or tangibles, which is things and activities. And when we think about sensory, we lick an ice cream cone, we're getting pleasurable sensory input, we're getting the flavor, we're getting the temperature, we're getting the texture. There's a number of different sensory inputs that are pleasurable there. But on the other end of it is we scratch an itch because that itch is an irritant. And when we scratch on it, then that irritant goes away. And so in that sense, we're scratching in order to get away from an unpleasant sensory input. And the same goes for attention from others. If you know me, you know I'm a talker. And maybe you see me coming down the hall and you're like, oh, I don't want to talk to that guy right now. You might duck around a corner or duck into a classroom. Then in that sense, you're getting away from my attention. Or we've all had our phones ring and we look and it says spam risk on it. And what do we typically do with that? We hit the ignore or we silence our phones or something, but we don't answer it. And that is, again, trying to get away from the attention of that spam telemarketer, or nowadays it's the electronic thing, but nevertheless, trying to get away from that unpleasant experience. So it really comes down to sensory, attention, and tangibles. I'm going to move pretty quickly here because we have plenty to cover and I want to give opportunity for Q&A at the end. So taking that antecedent behavior consequence piece that we just talked about 2 slides ago, what do we do and what's kind of the focus principle? If it's at the antecedent behavior, what comes before the problem behavior? If it's a problem behavior, we want to try and remove the opportunity for the problem behavior, or we want to reduce the motivation to engage in that problem behavior. So to think of it on the fly here, if we want to get rid of a student throwing pencils, we may not even give them pencils or have those pencils at their desk. That would be removing the opportunity. Or if they're throwing pencils because it always gets a certain student to laugh, then we might want to work on reducing the motivation to throw the pencils by working with that other student about not laughing or not responding when the pencils are being thrown. And that would reduce the motivation for the student to keep throwing pencils because now it's not getting the benefit that it used to. On the flip side, we want to create opportunities for the appropriate alternative behaviors. And we want to increase the motivation for those as well. So to kind of think of it in the simple terms, if it's a problem behavior, we want to remove and reduce. And if it's an appropriate behavior we want to create opportunities and increase motivation. And that's on that front end. And then we've got to look at the behavior itself. Sometimes the individual doesn't even know how to do the appropriate replacement behavior, or can't do it very well, or only partially. So in that sense, our focus becomes teaching the appropriate behavior we want them to do instead. And some of the things that are involved with that might be doing some direct instruction on how to do it, breaking it down into its component steps and teaching them the individual steps, maybe doing some role play on how to do it, different things like that to help them learn the appropriate behavior. So we teach the replacement behavior, and when we say replacement behavior, we want it oftentimes to have the same function, the same benefit to the individual. And in doing that, pardon me, in doing that, it may not still get the end result that we really want. So if the student is refusing to do work and they're throwing a tantrum because they don't want to do the work and the chairs are flying in the classroom, we may, in the interim, try and teach them a more appropriate way to get out of doing that assignment. But then ultimately want to teach them the new behavior of doing the assignment. And the goal of teaching the new behavior is that it's beneficial enough to them that they no longer feel the need to do the problem behavior. And so that's the 2 concepts within teaching that you see there. And then in the consequence category, what we typically say is, if it's a behavior we want them to do, reinforce it. And when I say reinforce according to the individual and what is the individual person sees as a benefit or the student sees as a benefit. If they really like the praise and attention, you might give them a lot of praise and attention for doing the appropriate behavior. If they're really into collecting those PBIS tickets, then they get a PBIS ticket for it, and so on. And then if it's an inappropriate behavior, there's the limit and discontinue piece. So limit or discontinue the reinforcement or the benefit they are getting for that inappropriate behavior. And this is the paradigm that is typically taught in responding to problem behavior. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see here. Oh, I saw a question pop up, and all right, yes, I do plan to share the slides later. All right, so next one here, we also have this concept here, reinforcement and punishment. A lot of people have misconceptions of what these terms mean. Reinforcement, by definition, it means that the behavior is going to increase in likelihood of it happening again. If what we do results in a decrease in the probability of behavior occurring again, that by definition is a punishment. So reinforcement, behavior's more likely to go up, punishment, behavior's more likely to go down in the future. And there are two different general ways that we can reinforce and two general different ways that we can implement a punishment. And so one way to reinforce is when there's something that they don't like and that they do the behavior we want, then what they don't like is removed. So to take that itch as an example again, something that I consider bad, that itch feeling, was removed after I scratched it, which increases the likelihood that when I feel itches in the future, I'm going to scratch them. And so that is the idea of something that I considered bad was removed after I did the behavior. The other side of the reinforcement is when something good was added after the behavior occurred. So take again the ice cream cone. When I lick the ice cream cone, then I get these things that I consider good, these sensory sensations, I'll say, these. So the flavor, the cold temperature, the texture of that ice cream, these are all things that I say, hey, this is great. It increases the likelihood that I'm going to put another lick on that ice cream cone. As far as the punishment, some examples of the punishment side would be when they do something inappropriate and we give them a reprimand or, scold or whatever it might be. That means that something bad was added to the situation, that scolding was added after they did the problem behavior. On the flip side, it could be that something that I like, something I think is good, was removed. And that might be because they did an inappropriate behavior, they don't get to do the go noodle with the rest of the class. Or sometimes it might be they miss 5 minutes of recess or whatever it might be. In that sense, something that I consider good was taken away from me. So the idea is I don't want to do that problem behavior again because it makes good things go away. Now, the problem with punishment is that inevitably it results in more behavior to try and get out of that punishment consequence. So if I go and I say, hey, you shouldn't have done that, scolding and such, they might go and engage in some other behavior because they want to get away from that scolding. They don't like that scolding. So now they do other behavior. Shut up. I don't have to listen to you, whatever that might be. Storm off. And now they've got more problem behavior because of the punishment that I was trying to give. On the flip side, same thing with if I remove something that they liked, so take away the go noodle participation. I may get more tantrum behavior because I'm taking away something they like. So punishment typically actually results in more problem behavior to get out of that punishment contingency, which doesn't help us much either. So then you end up with a new problem behavior. And this is the other piece too, is I may have pushed down that problem behavior, but what are they going to do now in that situation in the future? They're going to pick another behavior and it might be another problem behavior. And then I'm stuck playing whack-a-mole. And now I'm not getting what I want. I'm just having to deal with one problem behavior after another. So we really want to focus on that reinforcement side as much as possible rather than on that punishment side. And then the third column you see is extinction. And this one is simply, I'm discontinuing reinforcement for that problem behavior. It's not that I'm putting a punishment on, it's just I'm withholding, I'm preventing the good stuff from happening for you when the behavior occurs. And this is where we get that idea of I'm planned ignoring. You do the behavior, but nothing's changing. Whether you do the behavior or not, it's going to be the same. So why do the behavior anymore? This also can be good, but it can also run into some risks because a behavior that has previously received reinforcement and suddenly doesn't get reinforcement anymore is going to intensify before it actually resolves and gets better. So an example of this is if you have the remote control for your TV and you push the button on the remote control, the TV responds doing what you want to do, great. You push the button only when you need the TV to respond. You don't have to push it very hard. But if you push that button and nothing happens on the TV, what's the very first thing we do? We start button mashing on that remote control. The rapidness of the hitting has increased. The intensity or the pressure with which we push that button has increased. We may also take that remote and start smacking it on our palm of our hand or smacking it on our knee, which is now we've introduced new behaviors that are not necessarily constructive. And we're pushing that button some more, trying to make it work. Now, if because the behavior has gotten so bad on that increase, we have to give in. Now they learn, oh, that's the new level that I need to start with. And it's the same with the remote control. If after button mashing, the TV suddenly responds, we learn to just constantly button mash until we get what we want from the TV. And now our default behavior is button mashing rather than the previous single push, gentle push, and it works. So that's one of the dangers also of extinction, is that we call it an extinction burst, where it gets worse before it gets better. And as long as the getting worse still is manageable, and then it goes back to getting down to getting better after that, then that's okay. We can manage that. We can get through it. But the risk is if the behavior gets so far worse that we can no longer manage the behavior, and so that we have to respond to it in a way that inadvertently, unintentionally reinforces that behavior. It gets a benefit for the individual. And now they're more likely to go back to that higher level of behavior in the future. So that's extinction. Now, this concept here is the magic ratio. One of the things that is really important to understand is oftentimes our students have interactions with us that are unpleasant to them. And the question is, how many pleasant interactions are they also having with us? And research has said that the minimum number of pleasant interactions for every unpleasant interaction needs to be a 5-to-1 ratio. And that is not just interactions with people, that can be also with assignments. So if I'm giving that single digit addition problem, and they've had a history of being unsuccessful with it, then we're more likely to see them engage in behavior that we consider inappropriate in order to not have to do that again. It's become aversive to them. Just to keep the balance of it not being aversive and staying in a neutral spot for them, we need a minimum of 5 correct. All right, you got that right. Yes, you did it. Awesome. Or even if they didn't get it right, that they got some sort of pleasant interaction. That was a good trying. I appreciate your trying. You really worked hard on that. Those types of things. So they have a minimum of 5 pleasant interactions for every unpleasant interaction with that person or with that item or that problem or whatever it is that we're dealing with. Now, some research has found as high as 21-to-1 is needed. And why such a range? That's because we are all individuals with our own backgrounds and histories and experiences that we carry with us that is going to impact that ratio. And that ratio might also be different depending on what it is we are interacting with. Again, based off of our prior experiences and history and backgrounds and everything that comes with us being individuals. So it's really important to keep this magic ratio concept in mind and make sure that you are intentionally giving them positive or pleasant interactions when you are interacting with them, as well as with the materials that you're using, that they're getting that positive experience, that good experience with it. So it balances out when they have the unpleasant interaction with it. And this transitions us to another important concept. And this is where it may seem counterintuitive to some people or seem like I'm preaching a different gospel now or something. But one of the issues that we have had with ABA methodology and practice is something that was intended to be good has ended up having unintended consequences. So the idea was focus on the behavior and that it's individual behavior. It's not focus on, oh, this is a bad person, putting the focus on the person, but no, it's a bad behavior. And really helping to try and get away from blaming the person too much, so to speak, but really focusing on that behavior and just focus on correcting the behavior. And it was thought to be a really good way of approaching it, as well as, being a person positive approach. But it had the unintended consequence of getting people focused only on the behavior and forgetting that we are actually working with a person here, with emotions and with experiences and all that comes with being a person. And so what we ended up with was focus on the behavior, and we ran into a problem where now we have people who have grown up, who went through behavior analytic programs and are coming out and saying behavior analytic programs are child abuse, or they are bad for the kid, they're not good. And the basic piece is the forgetting about the emotional aspect of a person. And it became just a battle of the wills. No, I can't let you I can't reinforce your problem behavior. So you're not complying, you're not doing what I want to do. I got to maintain that demand, working through all of the, ignoring all of the emotional outbursts happening, the emotional responding in that person, and ending up with it being a very traumatic experience for the individual whose behavior we're trying to change. And so there's been a reckoning that's happened in the field where we have come to recognize that, yes, we get consent from parents, we get consent to implement IEPs or behavior intervention plans for the general education side through our student study teams or student intervention team process, SIT process, and different things. We get the parent consent to implement these procedures, but we also need to consider, is that student also, by their interactions with us and by the responses to the interventions, are they showing that in general they do assent to what we're doing? And that doesn't mean that if they normally they're okay, but one day they're like, to the procedure. It doesn't mean that based off that one time, they no longer assent. But is it a pattern of showing that they are okay with what we're doing or that they are not okay? And if they're not okay, then our ethics code now says that we have to consider changing our procedures, because it's very clear that the individual is not assenting to our procedures and it is being adversive and potentially traumatic for them. So what it's really talking about is shifting to a person-focused intervention concept. And it seems counterintuitive because it's like, well, behavior-focused, behavior-centered. No, we're looking at the person-focused, person-centered approach as we kind of look at when we are responding to inappropriate behavior. So I'm going to elaborate on this some more. And so right here, our typical focus has been at the tip of the iceberg, the part that's above the water, that which is observable, and we can collect data on it. It's measurable. And you've probably heard at some point, if you've been involved with behavior support, you might have even heard, if you can't collect data on it, or if you didn't collect data on it, it didn't happen type thing. Or that piece of, no, you got to be able to define it. You got to be able to see it to know that it's happening. And all the other stuff is stuff that we can't observe, so we can't really address it, is kind of been way a lot of people have been taught. But the vast majority of what's going on underneath is really those pieces that are informing, in many ways, what we are actually seeing and observing. There might be biological or medical things. There may be traumatic experiences that they've been exposed to. There might be social, emotional, different things, socioeconomic status, cultural things that we aren't seeing that then end up being interpreted, oh no, here's our problem behavior. And with the diversity, equity, inclusion piece, one of the things that has become a lot more discussion is how microcultures may have different ways in which behaviors are considered okay or not okay, or how to respond to different situations, and how someone from a white community versus someone from a Black community, or someone from a Hispanic community or an Asian community or other subgroups may see and how they might respond to something in their culture may be perfectly fine, but for us in the school setting with our focus, we're saying no, that's not appropriate, and we need to consider those other things as well. And how do we respond to them needs to be informed by these underlying issues as well. So it's important for us to be able to consider what is going on and think about their underlying issues underneath that observable and measurable behavior. The other thing we need to keep in mind here is our behaviors influence their behaviors. This is a two-way street. So our attitudes and our behaviors impact the behaviors and attitudes of the students, and it goes the other way around. We know their attitudes, their behaviors impact us. And so it's really important that we also be paying attention to our own behavior in those moments. What is our tone of voice that we're using? What is our physical posture? Are we standing over them, or are we getting down at their level? What types of words are we using? Are we using phrases and statements that are inflammatory for the student, or are we using other ways of speaking that help bring calm to the situation? So it's really important that we be thinking about our own behavior in the situation as well. Behavior is behavior. And I have this slide because I want to talk a little bit about some concepts from research. When doing behavior research, historically, we've used rats and pigeons as our initial test subjects to learn about behavior. And so one of the things that they do with rats is they put them in a chamber that has a lever, and they teach the rat to press the lever for a food pellet. For a pigeon, it's peck a button for the food pellet. And the animal learns how to do this. They're doing great, great, great. And then they turned off the lever to see what the animal's response would be when they no longer were getting the food pellet. And the rat, when it didn't work, the rat started jumping all over the place, squeaking loudly, banging on that lever, jumping around more, squeaking loudly again. In other words, the rat was throwing a temper tantrum. With the pigeon, when they turned it off, the pigeon started flapping its wings around real hard, cooing loudly, hopping around, pecking on that button a whole bunch. They were throwing a pigeon temper tantrum. Why are we surprised when students throw their temper tantrums? Now, for the next piece, they said, all right, let's bring in some fresh animals, teach them how to use the lever and everything. And now, when we turn off the lever, right before we turn off the lever or the button, we're going to put a second naive animal in there. The animal never been in this cage before. They don't know what's going on. So they add a second rat or a second pigeon, and then they go ahead and they turn off that button or that lever. Not only does the animal throw a tantrum, but in every case, that animal, regardless of whether it's a pigeon or a rat, would also turn and attack that other animal, that naive, innocent animal just happening to be in the cage with them. Why are we surprised when our students then, when they're upset, start verbally saying things that could be considered verbal aggression or engage in physical aggression? That is nature. They even went so far as to set up where there were two chambers with a door that could open to connect the two chambers, and take new animals, train them how to operate the lever, also train them how to operate the lever, the button that opens the door, a separate one that opens the door between the chambers. And then when they're all ready, the animals know how to do that. They put a naive, innocent animal in the other chamber, turn off the food pellets again. Those animals, not only would they throw the temper tantrum, but they would even operate that door to open the door so they could get into the other chamber to attack the other animal. Again, that is nature. We shouldn't be surprised when we see our students engaging in these types of behaviors. It doesn't make it okay, ignore, all right, it's no big deal. But what we need to keep in mind is when we are teaching them what to do instead, how to appropriately navigate the situation socially, we're actually teaching them against nature. And that's a profound concept to really think of. We're teaching them to do contrary to what naturally occurs. And we've seen it across species. It's that throw that temper tantrum, and if there's an innocent bystander, attack that innocent bystander. Attack, attack, attack. So we are actually having to teach kids to do something different than nature. I'm gonna move on to the next slide here. Because of that, I say, quit taking it personally. One of the worst things you can do when a student is having a problem behavior is to take it personally. Don't take it personally. It's nature. It's actually to be expected. And we do the same thing sometimes. Someone offends us and at the store, and we feel that need to go chew the ear out at the cashier when the cashier had nothing to do with it. We do that too. That's nature. So when the kids do it, we need to, number one, quit taking it personally. Now, I'm going to keep going here because interest of time. Who should we be like? Do we want to be like Mr. Rogers or General Patton? And if we're taking a person-centered approach, we need to take a Mr. Rogers style approach. We need to be thinking, channel Mr. Rogers, calm, bringing calm to the situation, helping children calm down from that high escalated point, rather than be General Patton and do it my way or the highway. Now, on this slide, we have a number of different things, but we have key concepts here that we need to be keeping in mind, especially when we're dealing with students who are coming from an at-risk environment or background, as well as those who have experienced trauma in their recent or past. Couple things with working with them. Remember, choice opportunities gives an opportunity for shared control, gives them the sense that they are at least have some say in what's going on in their lives. And that's really important. So listen to what they are saying they want. Can't always give it, but if there is a choice opportunity for them, go ahead and give it. It empowers. Also, make sure you are transparent with them about what's going to happen next. Anxiety goes up. One of the best ways to handle anxiety is to give more information. Think of it about the dentist. I was at the dentist last week getting a crown removed to put a new one on. And I have high anxiety at the dentist's office. What really helps me is when the dentist talks me through, tells me this is what's going to happen, tells me this is what I'm doing next. When those different tools are coming into my mouth, it's telling me what he's doing. That helps lower my anxiety. So being transparent and clear about this is what's going on. And then the other thing is validate the anxiety or their concerns. Yeah, this is normal. I'm the dentist. Yeah, it's okay. It's normal to feel anxiety while we're doing this. That normalization piece actually helps my anxiety go down. Also, you need to bring that safety piece. Are you a safe person for them? Do you say what you will, all right, let me flip this. Do you do what you say you will do? And do you do it when you said you will do it? That's an important piece for them, the kids feeling safe, is predictability. Same with the trust piece. Don't gossip. Don't talk about the kids in front of them or in front of other kids that they're going to hear from. That is one of the ways to just destroy trust, is to talk negatively about kids in front of them or in front of others. So just don't do it. And there are other pieces here I'm not going to go over, but I'm going to send out this slide presentation so you can review it later. So this next part, creating the calm, creating space for calming down, is one of those pieces. When they're escalated, when the problem is, for many of you, you guys get calls to come in and help when there's a behavior crisis. If you're an office manager, if you're a playground supervisor, or if you're in different roles, you may suddenly get called, hey, we need help. This kid is, or, even the custodians might get called in at those times saying, all right, we got this kid, we need help. What we want to do is we want to create space for calming down as quickly as possible. So here are key pieces for that. Let me get back to give acceptance without solving the issue, number one. You don't have to solve it right now. We can deal with that piece later. Just give acceptance of what they're feeling. 2, ask exploratory questions that create a deeper understanding. Oh, wow, yeah, that must have been tough. Tell me how you're feeling right now. Those types of things. 3, allow the student to be upset without insisting that they stop being upset. And that's that piece I see sometimes. It's like, oh, no, you don't, no, it's okay. It's okay. Calm down. It's going to be okay. No, it's fine. That's not helping. That is adding energy into the situation rather than calming. Allow them to be upset in the moment without insisting that they stop being upset. Number 4, accept that their perspective may be, and most likely is, skewed. Don't try to convince them of a different reality right now. If I'm in there and I'm trying to help a student calm down, I may ask them, what happened? Tell me what happened. They're telling me from their perspective. I assume that it's a skewed perspective and that I'm missing a lot of key details from the kid about what really happened. I'm assuming that, but I'm not trying to go and say, no, that's not what happened, or trying to convince them of a different reality in that moment. We can deal with it and debrief when the student's calm and kind of work through it later. But in the moment that they're upset, I'm not going to try and convince them a different reality. In the same way, if there's someone else doing this, don't try and interject and say, no, that's not what happened. You're not helping the situation in that moment. We understand, and from this standpoint for you as well, understand their perspective most likely is skewed, but that's okay for right now. We are trying to help them calm down. We're trying to resolve the behavior crisis in this moment. Number 5, tolerate those negative and exaggerated feelings that they are expressing in the moment. They're going and they're saying some things that are based out of those exaggerated feelings. They're using those always, never, those types of things. Tolerate it. Don't try and correct it right now. By them getting it out and expressing in that moment, it's actually helping them calm down if they feel like someone is listening to them. Number 6, give understanding to the student's issue, but you do not necessarily have to agree with it. And listening is not the same as agreeing to it. Just listen sometimes will help them come down. And listen with no agenda of teaching a life lesson. That will come later when you're in the debrief, or in the future when you're doing some retraining on what to do in the future when things happen. But in that moment, don't try and turn it into a life lesson. Their brain is on emotional end, not thinking end. There's no lesson being taught here. Furthermore, when people are very highly emotional, their functional IQ can drop by as many as 40 points in that moment. So trying to teach a life lesson is not going to help. Not only that, but in that piece, their frame of time can be completely lost, or it could be in the sense of minutes and seconds rather than days or hours. So trying to teach a life lesson in that moment is not going to work. Simply listen. We're focusing on helping them calm down and getting rationality back. 8, it's okay to validate their struggle. Wow, that must be hard, without identifying what they need to do differently. Don't go and say, oh, wow, well, next time try this. let's not be doing that while we're trying to get them calmed down. Just listen, validate without identifying what to do differently. Number 9, focus on the relationship. You want to establish emotional safety and stay regulated yourself. Trust this process. And again, it is a process. And we'll get a bit more in a moment on that. Number 10, and this is a key concept here. Be thinking about stress management rather than thinking behavior management. We are trying to manage the stress that the student is experiencing in this moment, rather than trying to work on behavior management. All that behavior stuff can come later. But in the moment, trying to help the student calm down to get rid of that crisis moment, think stress management. A lot of people say, but the student is going to, their behavior is getting reinforced. They're getting away with it. They're getting what they want. My question is, do you want staff getting hurt or not? And what is our priority? I think right now our priority needs to be staff and student safety in these moments. So we can deal with teaching and revisiting and trying to teach the appropriate behavior in the future. But in the moment, we need to be creating that space for them to calm down. So think stress management rather than behavior management. And remember, improvements and change do not come overnight. It takes patterned, predictable, repetitive experiences with accepting and regulated staff to bring about the improvements and change for the student. So it's a process. Trust the process. And as we continue to do this, we will see the change come. And this is my last slide here. They may forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And this is so true when we are dealing with the crisis moment. They are going to remember how you make them feel. They won't remember much of all of what you said. So focus on that stress management. All righty. How am I doing on time, Jeremy?
We've got about 5 more minutes. If you want to do like 5 minutes of Q&A, you'd be in good shape.
All right. We had one other question come in here. What if it's something we can't control, such as a new teacher, a new system in the classroom, and it's caused a lot of behaviors in the class? Yeah, that is always one of the difficulties, is when the teacher, who's the leader in the classroom, is saying, no, do it this way, not that way. And you're like, but they're adding fuel to the fire at this point. They're making it worse. They're not helping make it better. I would say one thing you could do is you could ask the psychologist for some help. Let the school psychologist know what it is that you're seeing and going on, and asking if they can maybe provide some help. And that would be my first step on going forward with that. The school psychologist at every campus is essentially the first, when it comes to special education piece, they operate as the special education manager, so to speak, for the school. They also do have training in behavior support and things like that. And so if you let them know, hey, this is a struggle that I'm having, do it in confidence. Let them know it's in confidence, because we don't want to be undermining teachers in that sense. But it gives a psychologist an opportunity to go in and observe what's going on, and then be able to maybe give the teacher some direction or take it from there. So that would be my recommendation. And that is the only other question that we have. Hopefully I answered your question. The other one that we had here was sharing a copy of the slideshow, which I said, yes, I'll be doing that. But we may have time for 1 or 2 more questions if people want to type in a couple more questions. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending. And if you see me around on your campus and you have a moment, you can ask me follow-up questions as well. I'm open to that.